Right. Hello. Good morning. It's 11 o'clock, Friday, the 15th of July. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world, because I know we do have a global audience today, as well as all over the UK. Welcome to the latest in our series of infrastructure intelligence live events, organised in association with award-winning communication specialists, BECG. Now, today, with nature-based solutions and biodiversity, easy for me to say, becoming more and more important on construction and infrastructure projects. It's a very timely moment for this webinar to look closer into the issues involved. Now, we all know that pursuing nature-based solutions is a crucial part of the fight against climate change and achieving net zero. And a report by the Environment Agency published this week reaffirmed the vital importance of nature-based solutions, and that report is also available to read on our website over at infrastructureintelligence.com. But today's event takes place in what could be described as a somewhat tricky political and economic climate, with the Tory party leadership campaign currently in full swing. And basically, there's a general sense that net zero is seemingly in real danger of dropping down the political agenda. But our speakers today will each look at different aspects of nature-based solutions, and also why it's never been more important to remain focused on net zero. But we have some fantastic speakers here today from right across the industry with, I was going to say centuries of experience, but I don't want to egg it too much, a little bit like that. But real experts on different aspects of net zero and in our sector. And before I introduce our first speaker this morning, can I just remind everyone watching that you're very welcome to ask any questions in the chat button, and we'll try and address your points as we go along this morning. But first, obviously, a big issue, nature-based solutions and net zero. And our first speaker today is Zoey Metcalfe. Now, Zoey is a client director with Atkins, and she leads the way on important issues including post-pandemic recovery, social value, decarbonisation, net zero, and health and well-being. Now, before joining Atkins, she worked with Ethos Wilder. Eventually, she co-founded during the pandemic to help scale up the health and well-being benefits from nature and agricultural regeneration, using credible data and funding and finance models. So, welcome, Zoey. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Rob, and it's a real pleasure to be with you all today. If I just I'm going to talk about nature more broadly and then pick up some key themes before handing over to Emma. So really, the main point is in our towns and our cities and in our industrial and business parks, we must stop living as if we are external to nature and recognise we are part of nature. We are healthier with nature, and nature is healthier with people who really value nature. Nature is the ultimate multitasker that can tackle the interlinked challenges of our climate and ecological emergencies in hand with industry reducing carbon emissions. And one of my favourite little examples of nature as a multitasker is the role of my favourite eco-engineer, the beaver. We recently worked with Spain's Hall Estate on introducing the beaver to tackle flood mitigation and also enhance biodiversity net gain. And since they've been introduced into the estate, they've been highly productive in terms of expanding their own family, but also in creating over 20 dams, creating pools of water and mitigating flood mitigation for the community downstream. Unfortunately, we really have been neglecting Mother Nature and continue to do so to the extent that we abuse nature. We take it for granted. I think in part this is because the benefits that nature delivered are not visible. We take it for granted that it looks green out through our windows and we've got food on our shelves, when actually the quality of our soil health, our water, our air is highly degraded. And the UK is one of the worst degraded countries globally. We've really got no excuses anymore. We've got all the digital technology and the data available to create Strong narratives create strong visualizations to multiple audiences, and this is a key emphasis for us at Atkins with our clients and communities in bringing this to life, so that we start to redress this imbalance and really understand the many assets that nature delivers for us. So nature-based solutions fundamentally can be the leveler in addressing inequalities in our surging and health and wellbeing care needs. We know that post-COVID mental health is a significant issue and is only continued to rise. And I'm delighted that with the NHS integrated care service that we have just completed 7 regional demonstrators here in the UK that are proving that social green prescribing, that's using health therapies in nature in our towns and cities, can really tackle mental health issues and also broader health issues such as obesity and Parkinson's. So from a mental health perspective, if an individual can benefit from Nordic walking or tree bathing or mindfulness or just spending time with others suffering with similar issues around anxiety in green spaces, quality green spaces in our towns and cities, then we can reduce the number of visits to GP and have this mutual benefit around resilience of nature, resilience of the NHS. But we do need to pay particular attention to addressing the inequality of access to our green spaces in our towns and cities, and also the quality of green spaces. The BAME communities and our deprived communities are heavily disadvantaged at this time. And we really need to look at how can we unlock latent value in our brownfield sites to reimagine those, not only to deliver against the crisis we have in housing, but also in terms of can they perform functions as green lungs within the cities? Can we bring nature in every day in our streetscapes through tree planting, habitat creation, through little insect hotels, etc. The other aspect that I wanted to highlight was really the importance of community activation in terms of engendering curiosity in nature, to develop the appetite for learning about nature, and then the pathway to developing new skills and new jobs. So the key role that nature can play in our productivity and our social economic success as a country. And then finally, diversity of partnerships is becoming even more important in delivering the level of regional resilience that we require to tackle climate change, deliver to net zero. An example of this would be in Devon and Cornwall, working with the Biosphere Foundation and the Wildlife Trust around mapping the significant interventions that can be made at a regional scale to look after our water, our habitat, our food health, using the latest data and technology to do so. So I think those are the broad elements of what I wanted to highlight in the conversation today, Rob. So at this point, I think I'm going to hand back to Emma, who's going to take us down into more detail around water infrastructure and the role of flood and water catchment in net zero. Thanks.
Thanks, Zoe. If I can just chip in before I introduce Emma and give a magnificent introduction. Thanks so much for that. Some fantastic points you raised there about how nature-based solutions can help contribute to levelling up efforts, including things like mental health and well-being, access to ground space, access to green spaces, making the most of brownfield sites, and community activation as well. Now, basically, if anyone's got any thoughts on the great points that Zoe's raised there, please feel free to raise them in our chat box, and we'll come to that during the Q&A that follows the rest of the speakers. But our second speaker today, so thanks for that, Zoe, much appreciated. And our second speaker today is none other than Emma Wren, who is Natural Flood Management Lead at Mock MacDonald. And we were delighted to publish a fantastic thought leadership piece last month from Emma on natural flood management, which got a lot of reaction, got a great responses for it. So basically, Emma has a broad background that spans flood risk management and environmental management of water resources. And she also works in a local community, putting basically a theory into practice. So she's well versed in and real sort of knowledge and expertise on nature-based solutions. So basically, Emma, welcome to the table, and the floor is yours.
Excellent, thanks, Rob. Can you hear me? Excellent. So hi everyone, as Rob said, I'm Emma Wren, I'm the Natural Flood Management Lead at Mont MacDonald, and I'm really passionate about all things rivers, community and the environment. So nature-based solutions are right up my street, and I'm really keen to inspire people to make small and positive changes that all add up to this bigger picture. We need to address the climate and the nature emergencies, and to do so we all need to play our part and act now. So we're living in a series of crises. There's a health crisis, a soil crisis, a climate crisis, and a nature crisis. And the World Economic Forum 2022 report suggests that erosion of social cohesion is the fastest growing threat to our planet. So all these things are pointing towards the fact that our planet is totally broken and this as a system, and we need a new way, a positive way out to fix our world. So now's the time to try and be radical, to shake things up and start working together properly. We can solve this, but we need to recognise that everything we do is part of this bigger picture, and we need to start small to ignite community action. So as Zoe said, my particular area of expertise is natural flood management, and I'm the lead author of the recently published Natural Flood Management Manual. This is a document that for the first time provides a start to finish route map for implementing natural flood management in the UK. People and organisations from right across the industry have contributed and come together over the past few years. It gives confidence in natural flood management, and it makes things easier. It explains what we mean by NFM, essentially working with nature to reduce the amount of water that rushes off our landscape into our rivers and into urban areas where it can cause problems. This is by managing our landscape differently, using a mosaic of techniques, perhaps things like creating woodland, restoring peat uplands, creating wetlands or ponds, and remeandering our rivers and linking them back to their floodplains. The manual works on the premise that everyone can get involved, and this is totally essential for success. We need to work widely with others to maximise the many benefits that working with nature brings. So I really hope that the new manual will improve three key things: confidence, outcomes, and uptake. So firstly, that it will improve confidence in using nature to manage flood risk and make it easier to do that, in particular empowering the community to own and take action on local issues that affect them. Secondly, that it will improve outcomes for everyone and help us all tackle things together and not consider issues in isolation. The manual will help you to understand the right measure for a given location and how to maximise those co-benefits for the wider environment and society. And thirdly, to improve uptake. My overall vision is that the manual is this springboard that launches natural flood management to be mainstream, being employed consistently and at scale across the UK to help us collectively address these nature and climate emergencies. So a great example to help improve uptake at scale is our work on the largest natural flood management programme in England upstream of Leeds. Mont MacDonald developed our award-winning digital tool, NFM Sites, to manage the delivery of natural flood management across hundreds of sites and implement thousands of NFM measures throughout the 700 kilometre squared river air catchment. So this will reduce flood risk in Leeds, but also deliver those valuable complementary benefits for local communities across the catchment and for the environment. And obviously, natural flood management is just one of a suite of nature-based solutions. At Mont MacDonald, we've developed an interactive nature-based solutions map alongside our 6-step decision framework for nature-based solutions to help make it easier for people to understand. We've also developed a range of digital tools that support this whole life cycle, from conception through to design and delivery, and then the ongoing and adaptive management that's needed for nature-based solutions. Most importantly, and my key takeaway message, is that for all types of nature-based solutions, we need to work with others right from the start and develop a vision for a place that helps solve multiple issues and create opportunities all together. And we need to remember that if we deliver multiple benefits, then our projects can be multi-fundable. We all have a responsibility. We need to get on with it. We need to find others to work with and achieve more together. So my key, the time for nature-based solutions is right now. Thanks, Rob.
Okay, thanks, Emma. Much appreciated. That was a fantastic insight there. Some things that are sticking out for me in terms of small things, small actions combining to make a bigger picture, and sort of like it's like a community. Well, it's almost like a teamwork effect, isn't it? Really, where that everyone working together, you can achieve great things as a team rather than just as a bunch of individuals. You referred to your manual, which was fantastic when I had a chance to read it. It's on our website. It's infrastructureintelligence.com. And if anyone would like to go to that, go to our website, click in Emma Wren in the search box, and it'll take you straight to it, which is can't get easier than that. Especially the importance of that manual becoming mainstream, so it becomes accepted norms in the industry as a whole. That would be a great thing to do. Like I say, we'll come back to that in the Q&As, but if anyone's got any questions they'd like to ask Emma in the meantime, feel free to pop them onto the chat box you'll see on your screen there. And basically, it's time to welcome in our third speaker for today, who is none other than Paul Morris. Paul is the Director of Civic Engineers based in Manchester. They're a hugely well-established civil, structural and transport engineering practice, and they've got studios in Manchester, London, Leeds and Glasgow. Now, Paul himself has 20 years experience in delivering sustainable urban infrastructure and public realm projects across the Northwest and the rest of the UK. And for his sins, he's also supported a number of local authorities in the production of design guidance and policy relating to nature-based solutions, which I think we can all agree is a fantastic hobby to have. So, Paul, without further ado, welcome this morning. Thanks for giving us your time, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Rob, and thanks also Emma and Zoe. Really interesting content and thought-provoking stuff there. I think we've touched on it already, but we're obviously as a society facing a series of different crises and challenges around housing, health and well-being, biodiversity, and of course the environment. From a nature-based solutions perspective, and when thinking about the environment, we often kind of default or defer to the climate resilience aspects, which are huge. I mean, the benefits that green infrastructure can bring in terms of climate resilience, in terms of flood mitigation and urban heat island mitigation, are vast and well known. But I think what I'd wanted to just touch on, which is talked about a little bit less, is the actual carbon reduction benefits of green infrastructure, of nature. There's obviously some direct carbon reduction elements that green infrastructure brings to the table in terms of carbon sequestration. You can't really get much more direct than that in terms of absorbing and storing carbon. Then attached to the mitigation angle, the taking surface water out of the combined sewerage network and the pressure that puts on the treatment plants and pumping facilities results in a significant reduction in the energy demand and the carbon associated with that, and also becoming more relevant, but in the UK, with rising temperatures and obviously the energy crisis, the cooling effects of green infrastructure in the urban environment can actually benefit not only the external spaces, but take pressure off the temperature in buildings and reduce the need for mechanical cooling and the energy demand again that comes with that. So there's very kind of direct contributions that nature-based solutions can make to reduction in carbon, but then on a more strategic basis, actually looking at the way we plan our towns and cities. We're trying to encourage people as an industry and as a practice and as a business to move away from the kind of car-centric way that we plan our new developments in our urban environments, and move towards a more walkable, cyclable, denser, mixed-use urban communities. And if we're encouraging people to live in these urban environments, then nature is critical to ensuring that they can still lead happy and healthy lives. Bringing nature into the urban environments, whether it's linear features within streets or new parks, and giving people access to this kind of social infrastructure is hugely important in encouraging that sustainable way of living and the carbon reductions that come from that around the reuse of buildings and infrastructure, and the reduced need to travel. One significant example of that is the new park in the Mayfield development in Manchester that we've just completed. It's a 6.5 acre city centre park. It's the first city centre park in Manchester for over 100 years, and it forms a green lung associated with this new development. It's going to bring with it thousands of new homes in a super sustainable location next to Piccadilly train station, other businesses and facilities to create a really strong mixed-use sustainable development. But that couldn't exist without the park being at the heart of that development, to provide that kind of access to nature for all those residents that will be moving into the urban setting. Another benefit from a strategic perspective, and again tied back to the travel and transport angle, is actually promoting walking and cycling over the use of the private car. There's lots of new guidance and policy around the delivery of cycling infrastructure, in particular with the LTM 120 being a key piece of guidance that's recently introduced. But if we really want to achieve that modal shift and make that really big impact, I don't think it's sufficient just to deliver safe cycling infrastructure. It needs to be attractive and it needs to be fun, and green infrastructure and nature can play a really key part in encouraging people to use that infrastructure, that outdoor space, and change the way that they lead their lives. Really good example again of where we've, as a practice, we've taken that approach is the Glasgow Avenues project in Glasgow, unsurprisingly, where we're retrofitting and repurposing 9 city centre streets with active travel facilities, but also incorporating nature, green infrastructure and sustainable drainage, which is creating much more attractive streetscapes, making the cycling and walking much more attractive as a mode of travelling around the city. And he's also taken a huge amount of water out of the combined sewer network, and redirecting it to the River Clyde. So huge multifunctional benefits, both in the natural and the urban environment. And at that point, I'll hand back to you, Rob.
Well, thanks for that, Paul. Again, some very insightful stuff there about, especially on the strategic roles. Easy for me to say. So I really should put a different pair of teeth in this morning. About the strategic role of encouraging developers to move away from more car-centric environments, reusing buildings and infrastructure. The thing that, like, a city centre park can be the fulcrum and the centre of a whole new sustainable development, promoting walking and cycling, and basically the role that green infrastructure can play a big part in the way people live their lives on a daily basis. So there's plenty of stuff there for us to chat about in the Q&A that follows our final speaker. But basically, just a reminder that for anyone listening, and I know there's lots of you out there listening into this and watching. If you've got anything you want to ask any of our speakers, then feel free to pop it in the chat box, and we'll get to you as soon as we can. So basically, our final speaker this morning is Jamie Gordon. Now, Jamie is a board director at BECG. I should say award-winning communications specialist, BECG. And Jamie leads their infrastructure and energy division. He's got more than 30 years experience in communications, having started in the advertising industry before switching to infrastructure communications in the early noughties, which I believe is the 2000s, if I'm getting my maths and sums all properly right. And we mentioned earlier that net zero was in danger of dropping off the political agenda. We've seen that with the hullabaloo of the current Tory party leadership campaign. And it just like a month or so ago that BECG and their associates Cavendish published a report highlighting that net zero was in fact in danger of dropping down the political agenda. And that report is also available to read on our website at infrastructureintelligence.com. So click in BECG net zero, and it'll take you straight to it. So, but basically, a lot of people watching will recognise Jamie. He's spoken at a lot of our webinars before, so much so that I'm thinking he must have more screen time than Hugh Edwards at the moment. So basically, with that, Jamie, welcome to the table, and the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Rob. Yes, well, as Rob alluded to there, I'm really a comms guy. I'm not an ecologist or hydrologist like some of our panel experts. Indeed, I'm not an ologist of any description, but I do understand communications, and nature-based solutions does face some major communications and as Rob alluded to, and other members of the panel, political challenges at the moment. We all live in a geopolitical world where food and energy security is king, and we're seeing the knock-on effects of things beyond our control, like the Ukrainian war, really having a massive effect on that. And we all live in a world of globalization, and that does incentivize challenges for us, like monoculture farming at scale, which in turn hardly helps with biodiversity. But policy change to this status quo really does need to be thoroughly thought through. We're seeing issues in Sri Lanka at the moment, which banned fertilizers last year, and that then had a knock-on effect to the rice crop yield this year, which, along with other factors, obviously is bringing that country to its economic knees at the moment and potential revolution. Now, in the UK, we've seen some fantastic policy change. Boris, bless him, net zero by 2050, who would have thought? 40 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2030. Now that's suddenly gone up to 50 gigawatts by 2030. Lots of change, but how much thought is going through on these policy, potentially vote-grabbing agenda? And very little legislation to support the implementation needed to achieve those objectives. And it could be argued that the last major piece of legislative change that supported the infrastructure industry was way back in 2008, the 2008 Planning Act, which streamlined the process. And at the moment, if you couple that with the fact that mankind is being inundated with different environmental messages, you've got climate change, you've got net zero, you've got coral reefs, plastic in the food chain, biodiversity. There's a lot going on, and now a new message in town in the form of nature-based solutions. And I think Emma was very right that we need to come up with ways of communicating this and improve, as Zoe mentioned, the general understanding of what we're trying to achieve. It's very much a push up from the bottom. Now, excuse me while I read this, because this is actually verbatim the description by the International Union of Conservation of Nature, their description of nature-based solutions as an action to protect, sustainable, manage and restore nature and modified ecosystems that addresses societal change effectively and adaptively, simultaneously providing human well-being and biodiversity benefits with common societal challenges cited as being climate change, food security, disaster risk, water security, social and economic development, as well as human health. Now, it's not exactly snappy. Let's be honest, we really do need to simplify this if we're going to get it across to the public. There's loads of other ones as well, just look it up on the web. But I suppose my preferred definition is whether any non-cost-based criteria within a natural-based solution is better than a purely man-made solution to the problem. And I'll come back to that non-cost-based perspective later. And any definition of messaging has to be crucial here, because actually out of all the environmental initiatives we have in our gamut, in some ways, nature-based solutions is the easiest and simplest one to understand. Because obviously nature-based solutions aren't new. indeed, by definition, they've been around a long time, longer than any man-made solution. And we've had millions of years of optioneering, stress testing, design tweaks, and engineering upgrade through an amazing process called evolution. And that is basically it. It's common sense, and as a message, it's easy to understand. But the question is really whether the public are being educated on the full potential of nature-based solutions. In a sense, there's too much environmental noise at the moment, and there's the rub really. The challenge nature-based solutions has is that it's often seen, and gets media coverage more importantly, as a mitigating solution to a problem that already exists, especially if that problem is a nature-based one in the first place, like coastal erosion. So if you take something like the Californian almond scenario, where obviously through monoculture, and they ended up with a huge pollination issue, and I think now they ship in bees from Australia or something very bizarre. But surely the truly nature-based solution would have been for the politicians to have a farming policy in the first place that encouraged more biodiversity and more bee-friendly ecology. And the one that everyone kind of likes is the Harris hawk scaring away the pigeons around Trafalgar Square. Now, surely, actually, that's again just mitigating a purely man-made problem. I mean, whose idea was it to allow people to sell bird seed in Trafalgar Square in the first place? So it's going back to making natural-based solutions more indigenous. Now, to drive the public to understand the true benefits of nature-based solutions and hence ease political change, we need to make it part of the design process, and not so it can be seen as some hippie solution to a problem we've made for ourselves. But things are changing. You know, the panelists have alluded to projects, and you've had great initiatives like No Mow May from Plant Life, and Generation Z is a different one from the baby boomers. I think it was Zoey that mentioned the mental health factor. Now, that's actually received NHS funding, not a huge amount against the cost of mental health of the country, but it's actually happening. And that is a major political change. For politicians to sign off any funding like that without worrying about the Daily Mail headlines the next day is a big step change, and something that means we can continue to move forward. It's a good time now to start educating the public, basically. So just like how large engineering projects position themselves as moving towards net zero, we need an easy way of communicating this nature-based solution, one that's instantly understandable by the public and the policymakers. Now, understandably, the almond farmers and the pigeon feeders can be slightly forgiven because of the ignorance at the time, but we know more now, and many developers really aren't accessing that knowledge. Emma's fantastic report on flood risk and nature-based solutions is a perfect example. That's moving us forward. But obviously, we do have mechanics like the Green Book. And I think too often these are viewed as guidelines and obligations. It's a mindset change. We need to make sure that nature-based solutions as a default option prior to the first design freeze on any major project. And to achieve this, it's particularly pertinent in the public sector, by the way, we need to get the whole benefit cost ratio or BCR process thoroughly reviewed, which is notoriously difficult to do. I mean, some of the UK's largest public sector infrastructure developers still don't have an agreed formula for calculating carbon impacts within their BCR. So, you know, there's a big education process here. So how could we make all that happen? Well, it's probably, I think, more a case of carrot than stick on this one. So if we go back to the idea of cost-based perspective. Now, let's say a project's going to cost X million to build an all non-nature-based solution scenario. Then by spending a certain percentage of that £1 million on a more nature-based solution, there could be maybe some policy incentive for doing that, maybe a fast track consenting regime, maybe additional funding for the project. And then this could be built in to the BCR evaluation process. So you've got more money and you're more likely to get the green light in the first place. And best of all, as we know, if you spend that percentage, it doesn't actually mean it's going to cost you that percentage in the long term. It's just difficult to calculate at the BCR rate stage. So just like lower cost doesn't automatically mean lower carbon, that's a given, unfortunately. But the financial markets are getting their head around that. They've waken up to the fact that lowest carbon does usually equate to lowest long-term investment. And in addition, infrastructure investors, I mean, pension funds are a big one, Ontario teachers and all that, now have ESG mandates, which mean large infrastructure projects aren't really caged by purely capital return evaluation. It's more about TOTEX or total expenditure rather than just CapEx. And adding to that, the fact that insurance companies have actually started to put a major value on the ecosystem and natural-based solutions, since they dramatically reduce the risk for some of their massive payouts, flood being one of them. So from a branding perspective, this is good stuff, particularly for the private investor sector. Their investors are going to be really pleased to see they're doing something. And a great piece of PR that's currently out there is Manchester Airport Group, MAGS, is offering 5 years worth of free landing slots to the first airline to land a carbon-free plane at one of their airports. Now, that's a great PR stunt, admittedly, and it's not exactly a nature-based solution, admittedly, but other sectors could follow suit. And I think one of them has to be the utilities sector, but ironically mainly owned by some of those pension funds. And they could develop initiatives to help push and fund nature-based solutions. For instance, the water companies would be one. They could have a framework of suppliers that everything has to get run past. So nature-based experts see everything that's going, and there's some form of a commitment throughout the business for nature-based, or even more simple in some ways, they could actually build an understanding of nature-based solutions into their engineering procurement in the first place. So they're hiring the experts from the get-go to design everything they build. And with nature-based solutions being a known methodology rather, the opportunities for collaboration then become absolutely huge. For instance, there could be some kind of mechanic that allows a nature-based solution to also act as somebody else's biodiversity net gain contribution, which would massively help with funding. But there's still a long way to go, unfortunately. I mean, only 3% of the global climate finance was spent last year on nature-based solutions. So the potential is huge, but the challenge is also massive. First, we probably need to educate the public, as Zoe said, and that then allows the politicians and agencies involved to feel comfortable pushing food policy change. And that's the confidence thing that Emma mentioned. We've got to get confidence in this up. And that in turn enables and incentivizes nature-based solutions to be at the very fabric of engineering design, whilst working with procurement departments to drive through that change in the sector. And that's the major uptake that, again, Emma was talking about, which would dramatically improve the status quo and hopefully give us all a far healthier planet. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Jamie. Amazing, incredibly insightful as ever. Main points kicking out for me there was that obviously nature-based solutions are not new. They've been around for a long time, even before the days of Tom and Barbara and A Good Life. Imagine that. It's just going back, showing the age. But also the fact that that nature-based solutions faces some obviously major political challenges at the moment. And basically, there's a need really, I think, to simplify the message if we're going to reach the public in an effective manner. And then we do that, we build confidence in nature-based solutions amongst the public enough to influence politicians, to give them the confidence and the space to push through the policies and the changes and the directions that are needed, and basically make it easier for the industry to actually embed nature-based solutions as just another way of life, really, as we move forward in the coming years towards the hurtling headlong towards 2050, which should be something to look forward to, I think. Now, there's plenty of fantastic subjects raised there. If anyone's listening, we know we've still got absolutely tons of people listening from all over the world or watching us. So if you have any questions you'd like to ask any of the panelists, feel free to pop them in the chat box. Otherwise, I'll have a few up my sleeve here that's come up from this morning. I think let's have a look. Paul, I'm going to go to you with this one. In terms of, we know there's always a big picture and grand schemes. And I know you've mentioned things like, reconfiguring existing streets and communities and so forth. But can you point to examples where nature-based solutions are making a real difference to the quality of life for local communities? And I'm thinking specifically in things like, reclaiming alleys and communal spaces and so forth for maybe sort of, pre-war homes and stuff, like old terraces and stuff that you see in Salford and Manchester, even urban, really urban, inner city urban areas like Middlesbrough do it, would you believe? So, Paul, what do you think of
that? Thanks, Rob. Yeah, I mean, there's a huge number of different projects going on at different scales across the country. I think there's some specific work that we've been doing recently in Manchester is actually exploring opportunities to retrofit SUDs and green infrastructure into city centre streets. And a big part of that, as with all our work, is actually engagement with the local communities, the businesses, the residents, to try and seek ownership and buy-in of the ideas that we're looking to implement. But also, I think with that engagement early on, we can actually, people do take on not necessarily maintenance, but they feel a real ownership for the infrastructure, and it becomes part of their kind of everyday lives and their routines. And you do see complete transformation in streets that were previously dominated by the car, or just traditional highways can by default become place streets. There's some fantastic examples in London in particular. I think Van Gogh Walk is an example that probably a lot of the people on the call or the webinar are aware of, where a traditional highway was completely transformed primarily by the introduction of new trees and green infrastructure that was combined with play as well. So that's one excellent example. There's numerous different examples, and the transformation that you can see through reconfiguring and repurposing our streets in particular is really significant.
Okay, thanks for that, Paul. Much appreciated. Go back to that. Right, sorry about that. Emma, if I can go to you with the similar question. I mean, one thing that struck me from yours is that a lot of like small schemes, a lot of smaller projects can build up into a bigger picture. Do you think that's valid? And is there any sort of specific sort of examples you can highlight as part of that, really?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of nature-based solutions, and in particular in natural flood management, I think it's absolutely essential that we have quite an organic process. It's very, very hard if you go even at a relatively small catchment, say 10 kilometers squared, when you're thinking about natural flood management. It's very hard to initially conceive everything that you might be able to do in that sort of top-down approach, because essentially you're working with lots and lots of different people, and you need to talk to lots and lots of different people to be able to understand what their aspirations are, how they might want to manage land. If you're working with lots of different landowners and farmers, you obviously need to take their aspirations into account, and things evolve over time. So in some ways, yeah, you need that top-down approach to understand what it is you could achieve, the quantum of what you could achieve altogether. But you also need that bottom-up momentum to get things going, to for people to be able to see what it is that you've done, and to get others enthused and to be able to do more. So I've been working in my sort of local catchment on a natural flood management project in partnership with the local Rivers Trust and others, and we over time have got different people involved, and that, you know, they all have different reasons for wanting to get involved. So there's a dairy farm who's done lots of work, and they are the people that supply milk to the local community. So they've got a vested interest, and they've also been setting up a sort of a ice cream business to diversify in a shop. So, you know, they've got a vested interest. Others have got different reasons for wanting to get involved, perhaps more from a sort of a nature perspective, a real passion to improve the natural environment. So yeah, I really feel that we need to be organic, and also because nature-based solutions, everything needs to be very specific to the local setting. And so we need to have the capacity to adapt over time and learn what works best in that given location, and be open to that, be open to the idea that in 2, 3, 4 years time we might just need to tweak. Might need to tweak things. It might be that we need to change the way that we let the water escape a pond, or that we need to change just go in and tweak the level of a leaky barrier we put across a watercourse, but that needs to be expected and built in from the start.
Okay, thanks for that, Emma. Much appreciated. Zoe, if I can come to you on a slightly different tangent here. You mentioned the positive role of nature-based solutions in health and well-being and levelling up. I mean, in terms of like the levelling up agenda and mental health and well-being, how do you think that sort of the industry can, you know, help bring that to the fore a lot more than just like nature-based solutions, and give life to that, the sort of the general well-being and levelling up agenda?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I think the key here is around is working across many agencies and many sectors, and not thinking of yourself in a silo. And if I take the West of England Nature Partnership that's been working on delivering the social and green prescribing therapies in region, that in 18 months it's grown exponentially, and the uptake in communities of utilising the therapies has been significant. But currently what we don't have is a clear pathway of what does that mean in terms of thinking about the spaces that we design and how our city functions or our towns function to help facilitate those therapies. So that can be as simple as introducing a bench under a tree, or it can be thinking differently about the nature that we need in our spaces. But I think, you know, picking up on Jamie's point around communication and that connection with nature, I think the other thing that social green prescribing does is, because you have tangible benefits in terms of your improved health and your well-being, the ripple effect is your friends and your family witness the change in you. They experience that, and they know that that's in connection to nature. But also your engagement with nature has changed. So you will articulate differently about the role of nature in your life. So it elevates nature. And it does what I said at the beginning. It makes what is currently invisible in terms of the assets of nature, we take it for granted. It makes those assets visible. But the other thing that's really key around this is really the funding, finance and insurance community. We've seen, as Jamie alluded to, significant changes. The Brunel Pension Fund's created a biodiversity net gain portfolio, for instance. But how do we help support the insurance companies from seeing nature-based solutions as high risk to low risk? So many years ago, the highways agencies was from an insurance perspective, you know, against looking at nature-based solutions as part of, you know, managing water. time has changed. They've been actively involved in lots of different demonstrators looking at different ways of doing drainage sustainably, working with farmers with EU funding to look at different land management that has a benefit on the resilience of the highway infrastructure, but also on the green infrastructure. So what I'm saying is, I think, you know, as we are in terms of the different practices that we represent on this call, we have to really think about our role as conveners. Who else do we need in the room collectively to translate conversations into action and applied solutions? Who do we need to bring on the journey so they understand the benefits and that it's not a risk, actually it's an asset, and actually it delivers long-term resilience? I think that's really, really key. That role that we play in that space as a convener is becoming more and more significant, of not just occupying the space traditionally of an engineer or a scientist.
Yeah, I think thanks for that, Zoe. I think you're right. And on the point you made there about national highways, I think it's fairly recent, within the last couple of months or so, that they produced their first ever biodiversity report.
Yeah.
And the reason I remember that, because I wrote about it, and it's on our website at infrastructureintelligence.com. There you go.
Yeah.
You can't,
Yeah, and I have to
always room
say,
for
Rob,
the
yeah, and I have to say, I mean, personally, I'm delighted, you know, the Ministry of Defence and many of those in working in the water industry sector are really, really pioneering and pushing nature-based solutions forward.
Yeah.
And there's significant work in train. So that the momentum is there, but I think the political agenda is absolutely key right now.
Absolutely, absolutely. And part of that obviously is key messaging, which Jamie sort of majored on in his remarks and stuff. So basically, I'm looking at the time and conscious that I don't want to run over the magic hour of midday and let everyone crack on with a wonderful afternoon. But basically, if I can come to everyone in turn and ask each of you, and I'll start with Jamie. No, I'll tell you what, I'll come to Jamie last because he's the PR, he's the common specialist amongst us all. So basically, if I have a final question, and given the the current Conservative Party leadership campaign that's ongoing, we're going to have a new Prime Minister within a matter of months, September or possibly earlier. What key message on nature-based solutions would you give to the industry, the nation, and the new UK Prime Minister when either he or she takes office? And I tell you what, first one, I'm going to go to Paul.
Thanks, Rob. I think obviously it's a really important message, and I think part of that is it's necessary. It's not really something that is optional, and it should actually be quite easy to deliver. And it's a straightforward way of addressing a lot of policy issues, not just specifically related to green infrastructure, nature and the environment, but as we've talked about today, health and well-being, societal issues, housing crisis. It has a key role to play from a housing perspective, biodiversity. So there's a whole raft of policy objectives there that nature can play a really valuable part in, and relatively straightforwardly as well. It's an easy win. Why wouldn't you?
Say that.
Back to Rob.
Sorry, I was caught up with the mute button there. It's an easy win. Why wouldn't you? That's a fantastic message to have for anyone. Emma, I'm going to ask the same question to you. What key message on nature-based solutions would you give to the industry, the nation, and the new Prime Minister when either he or she takes office?
Okay, so I'd say let's stop getting distracted by the here and now. That'll only lead us further away from the answers. By far and away, the biggest problem and the most pressing one for our society is the well-being of our planet. We need action to save it, and we need to work together to embrace nature-based solutions. Not as an add-on or as a token effort, but a real mainstream tool to help us directly tackle these nature and climate emergencies and deliver all of the other great outcomes we can with them for society. We all need to be bold, we all need to act, and we all need to do it right now. So what are you going to do today?
Excellent. Thanks very much for that, Emma. Fantastic again, clear and concise. Zoe, you're next on the stage. So what key message on nature-based solutions would you give to the industry, the nation, and the new, and more importantly, I would imagine, the new UK Prime Minister when either he or she takes office?
Thanks, Rob. Well, hopefully I'd have the conversation with them in nature, hopefully surrounded by farmers potentially as well. But my key emphasis would be reiterating what I said earlier, really, is that we are healthier with nature. Nature is healthier with people who value nature. Nature is the ultimate multitasker that can tackle the interlinked challenges of climate and ecological emergency in hand with industry reducing carbon emissions. And nature is a place where we can generate the next generation of skills and jobs that we could export internationally. So why wouldn't you? So I'm going to reinforce Emma's why wouldn't you there. What's not to love? You're on mute again, Rob.
I'm on mute again. Oh, God. So why wouldn't you? What's not to love? A fantastic message there. So, Jamie, follow that. What key message on nature-based solutions would you give to the industry, the nation, and the new UK Prime Minister when either he or she takes office?
I think industry, taking the first one, I think industry just has to be confident to bang the drum. And it's a really good message. It's really strong. We're getting some fantastic case studies to communicate out there and to drive the politicians to make policy change, but actually force them to engage with the sector when they make policy change and liaise with us. And for them, the policy makers, which I think was the second element of your question, to actually trust the sector, to realize we're not doing it to line our pockets. This is genuine advice. We're the experts. And if you're going to make a policy change, liaise with us how that needs to be implemented. I think there's also groundswell. I think it was Zoe that alluded to the fact that these things are exponential. And once you get something changed in the community and they start to see the improvements, it cascades out, and mentoring and advocacy programs are hugely successful. I mean, the community energy sector is just going ballistic at the moment because it's seeing some real success. And if you get that right, then you allow the policymakers to start picking around the edges as well with small little bits of policy change, whether it be, tax breaks on green roof felt or additional tax on astroturf or whatever. But it just means that you can make those gradual little baby steps as well. And all of it together will help dramatically improve the planet. You're on mute.
So every little helps then, to paraphrase Tesco in another way, way out of shape or form. Okay, well, we're coming up to the end of the webinar. Another fantastic morning. A slight apology to make. I'm led to believe there's been some sort of technical issue with our chat box, so we've not really seen any questions piling up. So huge apologies to that, but I hope we've covered pretty much the subject in quite a lot of depth, quite a lot of breadth. Some fantastic speakers. So basically, it remains for me to say thanks to our partners, BECG, for helping us put together today, and our panelists, Paul Morris, wonderful stuff, Zoey Metcalfe from Atkins, Jamie Gordon from BECG, and Emma Wren from Mock MacDonald. It's been another, I think, enjoyable and insightful morning, and we'll hopefully have a report and recording this webinar up on our website later this afternoon. Now, we're taking a break for summer, but we'll be back here at 11 o'clock on Friday, 16th of September for another webinar where we'll have another fantastic lineup, possibly including Jamie, we don't know yet, regularly becoming a resident with us, where we'll have another top lineup discussing how artificial intelligence will change the face of construction. In the meantime, check our website every day for the latest industry news and opinion, and sign up for our free e-newsletter that goes out twice a week to over 20,000 leading industry figures. But for now, thanks for joining us this morning. I wish you all a fantastic weekend, a fantastic summer, and I hope the suns keep shining wherever you are. So thanks very much to everyone, and I'll see you soon. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Oh, I am it. Thanks for that this morning. Much
That's all right.
appreciated.
Thanks very much.
Just going to end this webinar on you. Let's have a look. And webinar.